So, as you have all the basics on finding or evaluating of the core factor, it is going to be easier now for us to evaluate or to determine the determinant as we are working with what? The third order. So the question is, what was the use of the core factor concept that we worked with before? Say the cofactor of a certain element, it's assigned minor, you must consider the sign. From that concept of determining the cofactor, it is a continuation that you're going to apply, this time on determining or evaluating the determinant of a 3 by 3 matrix or the third order. So it is obtained by using cofactor expansion method. So we can determine the determinant or evaluate the determinant by what? The use, all right, or by using cofactor expansion. Cofactor expansion method. So what is it about the cofactor expansion method? We are going to expand any row, any row. Is it the first one, the second one, the third one? You expand any row or any column, any one of your choice, any row or any column using cofactors. Meaning to say the signs must be involved. So it's a sum of 3 products that you're going to have in determining the determinant. So this is what I'm going to do in short. You choose, all right, let me write it down. Expand any row or column. All right, using cofactors. Remember, you were saying the cofactor of element A, it's a sign minor. You take the sign, it's a positive. Then you determine the determinant by closing the row and column. Then you consider E, F, H, I. This is the cofactor. But it is not longer just a cofactor that you're considering because you're to expand. If you take this row, let's say for an example, I'm using this row. You expand using this row. It means our determinant of the given matrix of the given that you're given the order that you have will be equal to you expand by each element. So you take A with its corresponding sign. So it's going to be plus A. You are expanding the row. So A is part of the row. It must be there. But don't forget the sign. That's the cofactor concept now involving the sign. So element A with its sign. But remember, a cofactor is a signed minor which is found by closing the row and column where that element A is. Where that element A is. So if we were going to close the row and column where element A is, if we close the row and column, you'll be left with what? This is what you're left with. You determine its determinant. E, F, H, I. All right? Remember, we are using the row. We expanded from the row which has got A, B, C. So we move on to the next element in that row that we chose. What is the next element? From A followed by B. So we move on to B. But B has to be affected by the sign. What is the sign corresponding to B in that row? It's a negative. So B affected by its sign. It's going to be negative B. That's negative B. The sign has to be considered. Then you determine the determinant by closing the row and column where B is. Where B is. This is the row where B is. What about the column? This is the column where B is. This is the column where we have B. So we close the row and column where B is. You are left with what? Determine the determinant of that. You are left with D, F, G, I. This is what you're left with. Determine its determinant. All right? We move on because we are still in this row. There is element A, B, then there's also C. So we are going to move to the last element, which is C. All right, let's consider the last element, which is C. C corresponds to what? A positive here at the end. C at the end, positive at the end. So it's going to be plus C. Sign first. Plus C. Then we determine the determinant by closing the row and column where that C is. This is the row where we have got C. What about the column? C is found in this column also. So we close where it is found in the row and in the column. What is it that you're left with? Determine its determinant. You are left with D, E, G, H. So this is just an illustration that I'm giving, just an example to say if we were to expand using the row A, B, C, you can expand using the row D, E, F. You can expand using the row G, H, I, using columns as well. You choose. You're going to obtain same answer for that determinant. It is in your hands. So sometimes you're given specifically determine the determinant by expanding this. You follow that question by expanding what? But if the question is just determine the determinant of, determine, evaluate, you are not even told choose this row or column. You choose any row or any column of your choice. Anyone of your choice. All right, let me give you this example on the determinants. We want to evaluate or to determine the determinant from this. All right, let us just say evaluate. All right, there we are given -2, 1, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, -3, 0, like this. So we are asked to evaluate the determinant of this. So the determinant, like what we had before here, you must choose the row of your choice, the column of your choice, anyone. So just using this simpler illustration where we had the row A, B, C, I'm just going to choose the row where we have got the first row. So I'm going to expand using the first row. So here, I'm going to expand using what? The first row. So this is our first row. I'm going to expand along the first row. So we must consider what is it that we have on that first row. Element 2, element minus 2, element 1, element 5. These are the elements that we have. So minus 2 as our first element here corresponds to which sign? Plus. Remember from our maths of sign, plus, minus, plus. Minus 2 corresponds to a plus. So you must indicate that, even if you know that a positive does not have, but just indicate to say you are following the sign that is affecting or corresponding to negative 2. It is what? A plus. So it was going to be a plus. The sign first. But the number or our element is what? Negative 2. Our element is negative 2. But there was a plus here for the sign from the matrix of what? Sign here. Yes, our element is carrying a negative. But there is what? A plus that is there. So you must consider that. So this is our element minus 2. But we need what? Determinant that is going to correspond to that if we close the row and column where that element is. Where minus 2 is, we close the row and the column where minus 2 is. What is it that you be left with? Determine its determinant. You are left with this. 2, 3, minus 3, 0. Determine its determinant. All right. So since we are using the first row, let us move on to the next term in that first row. All right. In the first row, the following term in the first row is what? 1. That's the next element. So 1 corresponds to what according to our sign? 1 corresponds to a negative. So 1 versus a negative. So we're going to have negative, the sign. Negative. Then the number is 1. That's our element. So if it was minus 1, you're going to put a negative there. This one is just 1. So do not worry about that. Then we determine the determinant that corresponds if we close the row and column where 1 is. 1 is found in this row and in this column. This is where we have 1. First row and this second column. So when you close it, what is that is left? That's your determinant. You are left with 1, 3, 4, 0. Determine the determinant. Just like that. And we move on to the last term. Remember, we are still working with the first row, and in that first row, there is still another term to be considered, which is what? 5. This is the last term, 5. So 5 corresponds to what in terms of the sign? Positive. 5 corresponds to a positive. So it's positive, the element 5 versus the determinant when we close the row and column where that 5 is, where our element is. We close the row, we close the column. We are left with what? What we are left with, determine its determinant. You are left with 1, 2, 4, minus 3. Just like that. Yes, there are formulas that are being used, this and that. Yes, you can use those formulas. If you understand, it's fine. But all those formulas still they lead to this. So it is in your hands to work with those formulas, this and that. Determinant is simply determinant. All right. So our determinant at the end of the day was going to be what? We must evaluate now because this is a determinant on its own. Here it's a determinant on its own. Here it's a determinant on its own. Multiplied by the corresponding what? Elements that we have outside. So here plus and minus, that's a minus. So we've got -2. We must determine the determinant of this that corresponds to what we have. So product of the major diagonal 2 and what? 2 and 0 minus the minor diagonal 3 and what? -3. So it's just going to be a lot of things, but guys, it's just direct like that. All right, you move on. -1, determine the determinant of what we are seeing here. Major diagonal 1 and what? 0 minus the minor diagonal 3 and what? 3 and 4. Just like that. You move on to the last term, +5. What is the determinant of the 2 by 2 matrix? The determinant, all right, so you go back, your major diagonal, 1 and -3, 1 times -3 minus the minor diagonal 2 and what? 2 and 4. 2 times 4, just like that. So we have determinant here, determinant here, determinant here, but being multiplied to their corresponding elements with what? The sign. So it is now in your hands, guys. You can use your calculator to evaluate this whole part of your determinant. You can work it stage by stage. All right. But that was going to give us +9 at the end if you use your calculator properly. -1, you do the same, simplify this 0 minus 12, which is what? -12 plus 5. You simplify the whole of this part, so it's -3 minus 8, which is what? -11. So this is the overall determinant that you're going to have if you evaluate this. All right. -18 plus what? Negative, that's positive. 5 times -11, negative what? 55. Then if we are to evaluate this from our calculator, that was going to be -61. -61. So we obtained this by expanding using the first row. Use any, prove that by yourself. Use any. Try to use the second row. Try to expand using the third row, using the same concept, but do not forget the signs. Working with the columns, the first column, the second column, the third column, do that. You will obtain same answer throughout. Same answer, -61. So you can use that one as a proof, just to verify. If you have time, just try to verify this and that. So like I said, it is not always where you have the choice, where you choose any row or any column. Sometimes you are instructed to expand a certain column or a certain row. They will ask you to by that. All right. So for us to be very careful, okay, let us just use this one and expand, because sometimes if the question, let's say it was expand by what? By expanding the first column. What are you going to do? You are forced now to follow that. So let us just prove this one with another one, then we'll be done. You can do other questions, guys. Just try to work out as many questions as you can. It's just a repetition that you're going to notice when determining determinants. So it's just about more practice, more questions, you are done. All right. So like I said, on this one, we are going to just verify it to prove it, right? Let us just, by expanding the first row, by expanding the first column, not the first row. We remember we dealt with the column, with the row before. Now we need what? The column. By expanding the first column. So remember, these are our columns. So we've got first, second, third. This is the first column. By expanding using the first column, these are the terms that you're going to use. So meaning to say we are going to consider the signs along the first column. These are the signs along the first column: plus, minus, plus. The first column, the signs is plus, minus what? Plus. So determinant is equal to what? What is the first term that we're going to consider in this first column? -2. So the sign is what? Positive. -2 corresponds to a positive. So it's positive. The element must be considered. Element -2. Then we must determine the determinant when we close that element. -2. When you close its row and column. When we close it, what is the determinant? The determinant of what is left is going to be 2. We're going to work with 2, 3, -3, 0. All right, let's move on to the second term in that column. Remember, we are expanding the first column. So we dealt with -2, we are done. We move on, going down to 1. 1 corresponds to a negative. So that's negative. Our element is 1. Sign element, then you determine the minor, which is the determinant of what is remaining when you close the row and column where that 1 is. If we close this column and we close the row where this one, we're talking about this one in the first column, this one. When we close its row and its column, what is left? We are left with 1, 5, -3, 0. This is what you're left with. You're done. You move on to the next term in that first column. What is it that we are working with now? The last term, which is what? Which is a 4. This is our last term from -2 to 1. Now at what? At 4. The sign corresponding to 4 is what? A positive. So it's positive, and we've got our 4. Determine the determinant when you close that 4. When you close the row where it is and the column, just like that. So as you can see, guys, it's a repetition. I've been singing the same thing. You are left with this 1, 5, 2, 3. So it's a repetition. Just do more questions. After that, you can evaluate and determine your determinant. You're going to see that you're going to obtain the same answer for that one. All right, so let's see. Positive, negative, that's negative. All right, then we determine our determinant as usual. Major diagonal, 2 times what? 2 times 0 minus the minor diagonal 3 and what? 3 and negative 3. Just like that. So this is it. We move on to the next element, negative 1. Determine the determinant of what we are seeing there. 1 times 0, our major diagonal, there is what? 1 and 0. Minus the minor diagonal, which is 5 and negative 3. So that's it. We move on to the last one, plus what? 4. The determinant that corresponds there is going to be what? Major diagonal, 1 and 3. So that's 1 times 3 minus the minor diagonal 5 and what? 5 and 2. So you multiply 5 and 2. 5 times 2. So this is it. You have the determinant by evaluating each part. So our determinant at the end was going to be negative 2. Here you guys, let us just use our calculator here. You can do it stage by stage, no problem. But that was going to give us positive 9. All right, minus 1. You evaluate this. You're going to get positive 15 plus 4. All right, sorry for that. So we've got plus 4. You evaluate this. In your calculator, you're going to get negative what? 7. So you have determined each part, but it has to be multiplied by what is outside the brackets. Negative 2 times whatever that you obtain here, minus 1 times whatever that you obtain here, 4 times whatever that you have there. Then you can simply combine again on your calculator. You can just multiply stage by stage. Negative 18 minus 1 times 15 minus 15. 4 times negative 7 is negative 28. So that was going to give us negative 61 at the end. Same as before. Same determinant as before when we expanded using what? The first row. So some of us will be asking in the comment section, I expanded using this one, but the answers are different. It means there's an error along your calculations. So we won't know to say now which one is wrong. Is it the one that you expanded from the first column? So if it is like that, you must prove it. You must do at least 3. You expand using 3 so that if 2 are giving you the same answer, then you know that is the answer. The other one has got a mistake along your calculations, simplifications that you're having. Maybe it is the use of the calculator. So that is how you can work out these questions. But as we can see, it's just a repetition that you're going to have. Only you must just be careful. The question is about what? If it is just determine determinant, you choose any one of your choice, any row, any column that you're going to expand. But sometimes they specify by expanding this, follow that instruction. It's exam. Exam, you follow instructions. So please do revise, do more questions, more question papers as you are revising towards the exams that are ahead of time.